All right, great. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to our Sustainable Business Council webinar. Today, we're talking about water stewardship and business resilience. We have a great amount of folks here, some of you new, so I'm going to just give a little background on who we are as the Sustainable Business Council. It's our mission to accelerate the adoption of sustainability by integrating it into business operations and strategy, and also helping build sustainable leaders for the future. So we do this in a variety of ways. One of the primary ways we do that is through membership. We have business, nonprofit, and individual members who can join the Sustainable Business Council. With that, they get a series of education like this, so webinars, recordings, events. We have a resource platform. We host working groups and peer groups, as well as our annual conference. We have a tool called the Green Masters Program tool that helps businesses through a materiality process to help them define and prioritize their sustainability areas in kind of the holistic environmental, social, and governance lenses, and help them improve over time. We facilitate connection and events and help share our business's sustainability stories. So in the vein of helping businesses integrate sustainability, we also offer sustainability services. Here it's primarily through getting started in sustainability, building a sustainability program, greenhouse gas support, assurance, things like that. I did want to let everyone know that we have our Sustainable Business Awards. Those are open currently. They close in August. So if you have maybe a sustainable leader or sustainability champion in your organization you'd love to recognize, this is a great way to recognize them. Aside from leadership, we also have a sustainable product and a innovative service award. So I'll drop that link in the chat. We invite you to consider applying or nominating someone on your team. Some of our upcoming events I just wanted to make note of for those of you in Wisconsin. In September, we have a great event at Master Galleries Food. They're a cheese processor. We're going to look at all the great innovations that they have installed in their facility. In August, we're having a webinar on energy efficiency. And then September and October, we're doing a leadership development series. So stay tuned for that. And also want to invite everyone to our annual conference. This year we will be in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It's actually a 2-day event. We'll have several tours on the 4th, the day before, an energy forum, and that's actually in that evening we will recognize the Sustainable Business Award winners at a dinner, and then the conference is the following day. That is all coming together really great in terms of content, so that content will be out soon, and we invite you to consider joining us. All right, without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful speakers today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. With us today, we have Matt Howard. He's the Vice President of Water Stewardship at the Water Council, located right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We have Samantha from the Kohler team. She oversees the enterprise-wide program on water for Kohler. We have Noelle. Noelle is with A.O. Smith, and she's their ESG director. And also with us today, sort of representing the small business perspective on why water stewardship also matters to small businesses, is John, who's the controller at Engel Tool and Forge. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt next. I'm going to manage his slides, and he's going to share kind of why we want to look at water to begin with. So Matt, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jesse, for that introduction, and thanks to all of you for being on the webinar today. As Jesse mentioned, we're going to get into a moderated question and answer session here in a bit with our panelists, because we want to draw out some of that firsthand experience starting, running, operating, water programs within their companies. But first, we thought it was important just to provide a little bit of background in terms of, some macro trends that are happening out there right now, both in terms of climate and water, but also how companies are addressing and handling those issues. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes here kind of running through that. And then again, we'll get into the moderated question portion. I do want to remind all of you that are on the webinar, if you have questions, as we go through our own Q&A with the panelists, put those into the chat. Jesse is going to be monitoring that, and so we can potentially pull some of those questions in real time. So don't wait until the end, although we will have an audience Q&A at the end. If you've got a burning question, get it right into the chat. So as Jesse mentioned, I'm with the Water Council. I lead our water stewardship work. For those of you that aren't familiar with our organization, we're a nonprofit headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We work within the state, across the United States, North America, and globally, working with organizations, companies, and utilities and others to address their water quality and quantity challenges. We've been around now for about 15 years, and we really have developed two key platforms or approaches to working with organizations on quality and quantity challenges. The first is our innovation and technology work that we do. The name implies, it's really about identifying those new technologies that help companies and utilities address those quality quantity challenges and getting those into the marketplace. But the work that I lead here, and you'll see this on the next slide, is really focused on stewardship and really helping companies, helping organizations better understand how they use and impact water resources. And so we've got a couple of key approaches to that in terms of our work. We are a member-based organization, so we do have a specific level of membership called Water Champion. And it's really about building a cohort of organizations that can share best practices around stewardship. We also have a suite of verification programs underneath our brand umbrella called WAVE. And that's really about helping companies understanding water use, impact, and risk, and then ultimately the targets and the actions, mitigating actions that companies need to take to address those risk related issues. And then last but not least, we do offer advisory services for companies, for trade associations, and others. So that's just a really brief overview of who we are at the Water Council. Go check us out online. We're at thewatercouncil.com, and you can find all that information there that I just covered. All right, so jumping into, the substance here, probably the most, maybe the top question I get for companies that are new to water stewardship, or top concern, let's say, is that they aren't located in a region that looks like this, and so why should they care about water? And so here we are in Wisconsin. We're in the Great Lakes region. We just had, massive downpour and thunderstorms this morning. We've got 20% of the world's freshwater reserves in the Great Lakes. We don't see this out our back door, right? We're not in Arizona. We're not in Southern California. We don't really face significant issues around drought and intense or long-term water scarcity issues. That's not to say that seasonally we don't have some of these issues, and certainly some challenges to our groundwater depletion here within the state and the region, but this isn't really our lived existence on a day in and day out basis when it comes to water issues here in Wisconsin and the Great Lakes. It's more like this next slide, which really shows us the effects of water quality related issues on our water resources. This is really sort of the driver for risk and stress within the region, whether that's polluted stormwater runoff, it's polluted agricultural runoff, it's legacy pollution issues, mercury, PCBs, PAH, you name it. Of course, emergent issues with PFAS at this point in time. But really, our concern here in the area, and also from a company standpoint, tends to focus more on water quality related issues. And so that's really important for a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't necessarily have to be all that water intensive to face a risk from a water quality related issue, right? So we're not just talking food and beverage or petrochem or even pulp and paper when we're thinking about companies that may face water risk here within the region. The second thing is, when it comes to the water risks that we face within our region. It's not just quality and quantity, right? It's also infrastructure. We have significant aging infrastructure issues here in the Great Lakes and the upper Midwest, and also regulatory risk. And not just at the federal level, but really at the state, even from municipality to municipality in terms of how zoning and stormwater and things of that nature can be handled. So we really have to expand our risk radar when it comes to water issues here in Wisconsin. And as we see on the next slide, when we look at the status of water stress within the United States, it's not a pretty picture, right? And so this is from the Aqueduct Water Risk Atlas. On the left-hand side, you can see baseline water stress currently within the U.S. Low areas of stress are light colored all the way up to extreme levels of stress in the kind of burnt orange, dark red. And yes, you can see the usual suspects here on the left-hand side, certainly down into central Mexico, but up into Arizona, Southwest, Southern California. But what's surprising, getting a little closer to home, going up into the Great Plains, we see lots of stress, and a lot of that has to do with groundwater depletion. And even up into the Great Lakes, particularly in our neck of the woods and our side of the Great Lakes, we see a lot of stressed areas all the way up into the prairie provinces of Canada. Unfortunately, the picture of risk of stress doesn't get much better as we project out into the future. Remember when 2030 felt like a long time away? It's like just around the corner. And looking at this future projection for 2030, we're just really seeing a hardening of stress, particularly in this region. And you kind of look around the Great Lakes, there's a lot of red. And most of that has to do with issues around water quality. So I think that one of the key takeaways here as we move forward and have this conversation is just because we're located here in Wisconsin, or you're in the upper Midwest, or you're in the Great Lakes region, and you have that access and that availability of water, that does not make you immune from water risk, especially looking at issues of supply chain and value chain. So we just really need to be cognizant of that moving forward. Next slide, please. So one of the things, and this was just happened to be reinforced today in our local news here in Milwaukee, is this connection between climate and water. And for whatever reason, up until recently, the conversations, certainly internationally, have almost been siloed. A climate conversation over here, water-related conversations over there. And the Water Council, others, WWF, you name it, NGOs involved in water stewardship issues have really been pushing to recognize that climate and water are inextricably linked, right? I mean, they're almost one and the same. And in fact, again, this morning in our local newspaper, the Journal Sentinel, there's a new study published on climate impacts in the Great Lakes region. And a couple key takeaways there were 3-degree temperature rise over the last 50 years in the region. So average temperatures up 3 degrees in 50 years, and average rainfall amounts 15% higher in 15 years. And so what this means really is that we feel climate-related impacts through our relationship with water, whether that's rain events, whether that's our water bodies, surface or groundwater. We're going to see more water in some places, less than others, or water of poor quality. So if climate is a shark, you see the little quote there on this slide, water is its teeth. And again, we're really feeling those impacts right now in the Great Lakes, and really sort of this cycle of impact. Another really important takeaway when it comes to water, and particularly this issue linkage with climate, is even if we miraculously solve climate issues and address and mitigate climate change, we're still going to face some water-related issues. We'll still have water challenges, and a lot of that has to do with infrastructure, right? We still have aging infrastructure that we need to invest in. We still have water over-allocated or under-allocated or misallocated through regulations and water law and water rights and things of that nature. So there's still some structural issues that we'll have to face when it comes to water, even if we solve climate-related issues. So that can sound pretty daunting, but what that really means is we need to be vigilant, moving forward with water and climate related issues. We've got a lot of work to do. And again, whether you're small, medium size, or large, or whether you're super water intensive, or you're in food and beverage, or you're not, it doesn't really matter because we're seeing companies, operations, and supply chains being severely disrupted by water, and it has nothing to do with how much water they're using. So it's really a call that we need to start viewing water as an asset that needs to be stewarded for our organizations. And as a result of that, hopefully that sort of changes the way that we view water related issues. Next slide, please. So I took this from Will Sarney. Some of you may know him, one of the leading thinkers on water. This is from a book of his from a couple of years ago. I like this because this really helps, hopefully, each of you on this webinar kind of visualize where you're at, but also give you a sense of where you could be at, depending on how you might want to accelerate your water stewardship journey. So we see business value on the vertical, we see impact on the horizontal. Let's hope that we're all doing basic water management, right? That we've got water aspects kind of built into our ISO 14001 or our other EMS systems, that we're certainly regulatory, we're compliant with our regulations and our legal obligations, water efficiency, we don't have pooling of water, we really are being efficient with how we're using water. And we can see the impact of water management around cost minimization, water conservation, things of that nature. That's the basics. That's what we need to be doing. And quite frankly, for some of you, again, depending on where you're located and sort of what your overall water intensity is, that may be enough, right? But for others of us, we really need to begin looking for more opportunities to minimize risk. And so we kind of look into now moving over to the right into water stewardship. And we can see we get into sort of this risk management perspective and kind of expanding our risk radar: quality, quantity, physical, regulatory, reputational risk. That's really important from an operational standpoint because it really helps us to address things like our social license to operate or social license to grow. But in order to do that, we kind of have to get outside of our four walls and outside our fence line and start looking into the watershed and really understanding risk that lives in the watershed, but also engaging with stakeholders who can help us understand some of those risk conditions and can also potentially partner with us on collective action and water projects. And so as we continue moving to the right and companies start getting into developing a water strategy, that's really where we begin developing brand value, really enhancing our brand value, really get into innovation and really see business growth and connectivity tied back to what we're doing around water stewardship. Just as an example, a company that we work with a lot at the Water Council, Ecolab, they're a company that's really been able to sort of build water strategy and innovation into the brand, into their business operations. And there are many others that I could name. But again, you kind of see this continuum here. You're going to find value no matter where you're at on this continuum. But again, depending on what your overall risk level is, your level of water intensity, you may find yourself moving more and more over to the right-hand side. Next slide, please. So as we kind of wrap up this little intro and get into our facilitated Q&A, I just wanted to point out some kind of emerging trends right now that I'm seeing, both in terms of conversations I'm having with companies, with trade associations and others, things that are happening right now in terms of water out there, both here in Wisconsin and globally. I think one of the biggest ones right now is we're really trying to reinforce that water is a nexus issue. And so we've talked a lot about in the past, kind of this water energy nexus. I see this every day. We do a lot of work in the chemistry sector with the American Chemistry Council, use a lot of water in their manufacturing process, both as an input to production, but also in terms of cooling, boilers, you name it, so that really acute connection between water and energy. We're also seeing and seeing companies start to be a lot more strategic about the connection between water and nature and biodiversity, for instance. So if you're really improving water outcomes in your operations, you're ensuring that your footprint is not having a negative impact on the surrounding watershed, that's going to naturally lead to enhanced nature and biodiversity outcomes. So for those of you that maybe are having trouble like putting an ROI together or penciling out, a water specific program, look for some of these nexus issues to maybe help bolster that ROI and couple maybe those projects together. Again, energy, nature, biodiversity. We're really starting to see companies be more strategic in connecting those in terms of the benefits. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of, and we're hearing this from, again, organizations like WWF, the CEO Water Mandate, the UN, and others, is really a push for collective action. In other words, where companies are co-located next to other water using, companies in the same watershed, are there opportunities to partner to address a common risk that they're facing, both in terms of a water quality challenge or a water quantity challenge, whatever the case may be. Again, we're seeing, and this isn't really tied to our work at the Water Council, but in the sector, in the chemistry sector, there's a lot of operations between Houston and New Orleans, petrochemical on the shores of the Gulf, a lot of issues with subsidence, stormwater impact, and we're seeing those companies partner together and invest in habitat restoration and mangrove restoration and things of that nature to help reduce storm surge and reduce impact on their infrastructure. So there's lots of different opportunities out there for collective action. And it's something definitely, again, to keep an eye on. That's tied to stakeholder pressure. Again, we may not see a lot of movement at the federal level. And in fact, quite frankly, we're going backwards in terms of water regulations and air regulations right now, but investors are not going backwards. Investors are pushing companies to really get a better handle and a better understanding on how they're using and impacting water, as well as your customers. And we're going to see supply chain pressure as well from OEMs and brands kind of reaching out through the supply chain to get companies to really begin reporting and begin, quote unquote, doing something on water. I talked a little bit about extreme weather events. Again, it doesn't particularly matter how water intensive you are right now. We're seeing lots of different types of extreme weather events. I'm going to use another example close to home here in Milwaukee, and this is public, but the Brewers, AmFam Field, where they play, over the past 3 or 4 years, they've had a significant increase in their insurance premium year over year because of the increased amount of stormwater that they have to handle and manage on site. They're also adjacent to the Menominee River, so there's been some additional flooding as a result of increased rain events. And so it's not an overly water intensive operation, is it? But yet they're feeling that climate and that water related impact through increased insurance premiums. So it's just a call again for companies to really expand that risk radar. And just to wrap things up here, and then we'll jump into the conversation, operational and supply chain resilience. Again, you can't predict that 500-year storm event, but building in that resilience, both in terms of externally, in terms of how you're handling and mitigating stormwater on site and stormwater runoff, but also in terms of your own operations and supply chain, and really, building that knowledge base to better understand where you could face some operational disruptions from extreme weather events. So those are some of the emerging trends. We're going to jump now right into our facilitated conversation and hear from the experts who are doing this stuff within their own organizations. So just for the audience, again, remember, if you've got questions, put them into the chat. Jesse's going to monitor that as we kind of move through, but there'll also be an opportunity at the end for a facilitated audience Q&A. And we've tried to do this so we've got a bit of a different experience from each of our panelists here. And the questions are structured in such a way we'll kind of walk through a water stewardship journey, if you will, and different aspects of that. So we're going to start, right at the beginning. And both Noelle and John, to varying degrees have really started a water stewardship program in their companies over the past, 2 or 3 years. But John, I'm gonna start with you, and I know a lot of this work kind of predates you in terms of your work at Engel Forge. But why a forge? Why does a forge care about water? And really, maybe some lessons on getting started from the small business perspective. So we'll start with you, John. Anything you want to share about your own journey and getting started with doing water stewardship at Engel?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Just to introduce myself, I'm the controller here at Engel Tool and Forge. As Matt mentioned, we are a smaller company. At any given time, we have about 17 employees and about $20 million in revenue. We're also located right downtown Milwaukee. In fact, we are 2 blocks from the Allen Bradley clock tower. So that'll give you an idea of where we are. Now, we got into water stewardship not through something that we did, but because we were approached by the Harbor District and the Water Council. And my understanding, and Matt can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding was that several years ago, the Harbor District came into some funding that was earmarked to try and promote water stewardship in the area. And they were doing this with the Alliance for, oh shoot, what is the S?
The
Alliance for
Alliance
Water.
For Water Stewardship.
Thank you. I should know that. I say it enough. But yes, so they approached us and basically asked if we would be interested in going through this water stewardship and getting certified. And we thought, well, sounds free with their funding, so let's give it a try. So this predated me, and we became AWS certified. Then the person that took care of that in our company left, and the responsibility of that fell onto myself. So when it became time to renew, we looked into AWS again, and right now I'm going down a different tack. So we're going to be certified again. I've gone through this journey twice now. The second time we're going to be doing it with STS Global Services. And if anyone wants to talk to me about that later, that we can do that offline or later. I don't want to spend too much time on the differences between the two. But yeah, so, and to answer one of your questions, the reason that we think it is important is we are trying to branch out. We do have overseas customers, and we are getting, we are being asked about things like carbon footprints. So right now, the carbon footprint is the hot thing. We believe that the next hot thing is going to be water. So we want to be proactive and get into it. But another thing that we see from this offers us an area of differentiation from our competitors.
So I do want to unpack this a little bit because there's some interesting little nuggets here. There's the obvious takeaway, free. But as you said,
Formerly free, yes.
Formerly free, but the second time around, you're paying, you're willing to invest now. So clearly there must have been some benefit back to you from going through that certification process the first time. If now you're willing to invest in, I think a bit of a different certification. Maybe you could just tell us a bit of some of the learnings or some of the takeaways that you gathered from kind of that first go around of doing water stewardship?
Well, what we learned from the first go around really informed my decision for the second go around, and that had to do with how the water stewardship program, or I should say certification, relates to our own business. AWS is very broad, and a lot of it is not tailored for a urban centric company like ourselves. And so there's a lot of WASH standards and indigenous person standards and rights and water rights that simply do not apply when you're in the city. Now, as far as what we might think of as an ROI on this, we're banking on the future. For us, this is a long view. We believe that this will be a differentiator that will pay off for us in the future. And the 10,000, 12,000, whatever dollars we spend a year on the certification, plus whatever we spend on my time to keep this going, for us, we believe is a small investment. We think that we will get several times that back in the future. It's not something that repays immediately in our case.
So the other piece, and thanks for that, John. The other piece here too that I want to draw out, and then I want to transfer kind of over to you, Noelle, is this idea around competitive advantage. John, you mentioned, some customers and others, and kind of you're forward looking. You want to differentiate yourself in your operations, maybe from your competitors. I mean, Noelle, you're at A.O. Smith. You can tell us a little bit about what you do in terms of your answer here in a second, but water is part of your brand, right? So that must have informed your implementation of, kind of moving forward on your water stewardship journey. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Noelle, and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. I'm Noelle Brigham. I'm the ESG director at A.O. Smith. And A.O. Smith, as Matt mentioned, we're a water technology company. Our products are water heating products, boilers, and then we also have a water filtration business. And so just water is part of our brand. It's part of our company. And so it was a definite fit for our strategic focus on sustainability. As far as getting started, definitely started in the data collection phase. We are a global manufacturer, so we have large manufacturing plants as well as product development and engineering. And so gathering data, understanding how, where, and why we use water was where we started. We did engage third parties to review our processes, go through our plants. So a lot of feedback from them was helpful too in getting started. And then in 2022, so that data gathering started maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But in 2022 is when the Water Council launched their WAVE program. And so we were one of the pilot companies that it's an enterprise-wide view. So instead of a site-specific, it helped for a global company in many countries with a lot of different processes. It was a way to kind of zoom out and look at your company as a whole and start prioritizing where to start that journey. So, do refer to WAVE as one of our early tools to get us going.
And so again, just to kind of draw things out here, for the audience, in terms of getting started, you mentioned obviously the importance of data collection, right? I mean, you can't move forward unless you know where you're at, right? And so you've got to do that baselining. Could you tell us a little bit more just in terms of, you've done the baselining, you've done your risk assessment, kind of what's your next step now at A.O. Smith with your water journey?
So our next step, we are actually, even speaking more to the Water Council, they had the WAVE program where they have advanced that into a WAVE action program. And so we have set our goal. And so we're in that goal implementation phase where we're implementing projects, learning lessons from the projects we've implemented, measuring results, and then expanding that and growing that.
Excellent. Thanks. I owe you lunch now. So I think we should move into Samantha and hear a little bit from her in terms of her experience at Kohler. So we've talked about getting started. We've talked about gathering data, doing some risk assessment. But companies also need to have a way of prioritizing where water kind of fits on their priority list, but also understanding, we call it materiality, understanding how important water is to our operations. So Samantha, obviously introduce yourself and what you do at Kohler, but then also give us a little bit of insight into your journey around materiality and prioritization of water within your operations.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. And hi, everyone. My name is Samantha McLelland. I am the program manager for water at Kohler Company. So I lead our enterprise water strategy, like Jesse and Matt said. But I think, again, for similar to A.O. Smith, water is a part of our DNA. It's who we are. It's what we focus on. It's what our products support. So every time someone uses our products, they are interacting with it. They're experiencing it. We're influencing kind of their relationship with it. So we take that responsibility really seriously and why water is such a material topic to us. And that's really on the product side, but our water ambition is water stewardship through uncompromising design. And when we say that, of course, we're talking about our products, our consumer experience, but we're really talking about our operations too, and the broader watershed that we sit on. So how do we design our operations in a way that we can use every drop to its full potential? I actually saw some of our operations teams on this call, and they've done a really amazing job in figuring out how do we use every drop to its full potential, be good stewards of it, but then also look outside of our fence line and understand what are the main issues within our watershed that are a risk to Kohler, and also just a risk to our associates, right? Our associates live in these communities impacted by these water issues, whether it's, too much water, too little, or the water is too polluted, like you said, Matt. So, yeah, so I think it being a material topic to us was very obvious. We have used a lot of different frameworks to make sure that we're doing this in line with best practice. So AWS was mentioned, Alliance for Water Stewardship. The Global Reporting Initiative is another one that our ESG team uses really from a data standpoint to make sure that we're being transparent. We also use the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. Seems a little unique, but it's an established framework that we can kind of tailor to the water side as well. And then most recently, our ESG team performed a double materiality assessment. So doing that double materiality assessment really affirmed or confirmed that water was, I think it was number 2 on most material topic that Kohler should be focused on from an operations and supply chain and then ultimately product perspective. So yeah, that's kind of the process we went through and how we prioritize.
Thanks, Samantha. I'm wondering, just a follow-up question for you on double materiality. That might be new for some of the folks here, on the webinar. What does that mean?
Yeah, so essentially double materiality is something that was born out of regulation. So regulation in the EU and different parts of the world were requiring a double materiality assessment so that when we were reporting on sustainability impacts, they knew that we were focused on, what's most important for this company. And it doesn't really mean just what's important to us in terms of risk to us from the outside environment, but also what impacts could we have on the environment, either through the amount of water we use, the water quality that we're putting back into the environment, how we interact with our communities. So that's where that name double materiality comes in, is it's what are we doing to the environment and to surrounding communities, and then also how is the environment and those communities impacting us as a business as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And so I think now, just in terms of hearing each of you, John, Noelle, and Samantha, kind of your individual journeys up to this point in time, we've talked about the importance of data. We've talked about materiality assessments. We heard a little bit from Noelle in terms of risk assessment. Are there any, at this point, tools or resources that you want to highlight that you've used that you think would be helpful for others, both in terms of just helping you understand, risk or stress? I know, Samantha, there's a lot of free tools out on the internet to help companies do like materiality assessments. But just open question to the three of you. Somebody wants to get started on the water journey. They want to collect data. They want to understand risk, understand materiality. Where might they go?
I'm just going to jump in quick. While you're answering that, we had a question in the chat that relates to this. So emerging technologies and tools, which is essentially what you asked, but also data sources to help you evaluate water stress and scarcity for operations from a global perspective. So that might be more of a question Noelle and Samantha can weave into that response.
Yeah,
Sure.
I can also talk a little bit about that just because I was thinking about that this morning. In our case, because I'm going through setting up the certification again, I'm also going through setting up our risk assessments and all of the matrices, decision matrices that we made before. And what's informing some of the outside risks, like you're saying now, are, or as Matt mentioned, the WWF. World Wildlife Fund. They have an excellent site that can give you a lot of different risks, not only geographically for scarcity, but also as far as reputational and regulatory risks that you see. Another thing that I used in the past was the U.S. Geological Society to define what catchment we're in. And I've also used in the past FEMA's website, which lays out flooding risks.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Samantha or Noelle, any other? sources?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Matt, you highlighted this in one of the images, but the Water Resources Institute Aqueduct tool is a really great place to start. And even for people who aren't in operations, like from a Kohler perspective, our sales teams, when they're selling to customers and want to understand what are the risks to my area and to the person who needs this product, or what are they experiencing just in their daily life. It's a really good tool to see those issues at a high level, and then you can focus in on the different geographies and use some more, always go localized, go a little bit deeper than those broader tools. Maybe look at government websites, rainfall data, even just a quick Google on what are the water issues in this area can give you a lot of information. So another really great tool to utilize.
Yeah, excellent. Noelle, anything you want to add?
No, I'll just add the WRI reference. It has a nice capability where you can just enter all of your locations and then you can export a database, and that can then be converted into a heat map, which is really helpful. It kind of in a spreadsheet gives you all these different risks and has numeric ranking for you, so you can easily do an analysis on the data. So it's just a really nice tool and a streamlined way to get an overwhelming amount of data and turn it into something that is decision useful. So I'll just add that as a feature of that tool.
Excellent, thanks. Yeah, so I think kind of moving into sort of our next area, next topic of conversation here, for the panelists, a takeaway clearly of working in water is that water is hyperlocal, right? So the risks change from location to location. And if you're like A.O. Smith or Kohler and you've got multiple sites located over many geographies, maybe many countries, maybe several continents, how do you go forward with implementing projects or mitigating actions that make sense for that location, let alone just even understanding how you might prioritize those risks across your organization? So we're going to kind of dive down a little bit into some actual project work. The risk assessment and prioritization question is open to the panel. So if you want to answer that, you can answer that. Also, though, I would like to hear some specific projects that you're undertaking, again, that directly relate to your overall water use profile, right? Because that's so important. We don't, with water, we don't want to do random acts of kindness. We want to do strategic and targeted acts of kindness. And I know, John, specifically for you, you mentioned you're in an urban area, a lot of hardscape, right? Discharge runoff is potentially an issue here within the city of Milwaukee. Maybe this is just an opportunity for you just to talk a little bit about some of your discharge monitoring and some of the other work that you're doing in that regard.
Yeah, so one of the things about the way MMSD works, the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, is that they're closely related to the waterworks in that we pay for water coming in, we don't pay for water going out. We pay the sewage district based on, I believe, how much area we take up. And so you don't automatically know, right? So you know how much water is coming in because you're billed for that every month and you've got a meter on the side of the building, but you don't know how much water is going out. The assumption, of course, is whatever comes in goes out. But that isn't actually necessarily the case. And one of the reasons that it isn't is because we use water basically for cooling our equipment, and that goes through a chiller, right? A cooling tower, which is open to the air. So everything is kind of semi-closed except for that one little area, and the water evaporates there. So that's not being discharged. So one of the things that we have done, because we want to know, is we've added some meters on the outlet side. So now over the last couple months, we've been watching to see how much water is actually going out into the sewers. And that the difference between that and the water coming in is the water loss due to evaporation.
Yeah, that's a really good takeaway, kind of the simple approach to doing a water balance at a site, just to really help you understand where there might be some unaccounted water losses, back to some of the basics in terms of data collection, but also that's a very relevant activity to undertake at your facility, again, given sort of the urban context and some of the runoff discharge issues that we kind of face here in the city of Milwaukee. But Noelle and Samantha, you've got, again, a water strategy or water approach for each of your companies, and you have to adapt that across many different geographies, right? And sort of different regulatory contexts. So I'm wondering, either one of you can address this question, but just tell us how have you adapted your strategies and how do you account for those differences across your enterprise?
I can chime in on that. So just having some teams within the company. So we're manufacturers, so there's some core processes that are in common, whether in any geography. So breaking things down as to those core processes and kind of digging deeper, how do they use water? What are different locations? How are they using water differently and optimizing that? So that's kind of one way to align on that internally. And then different geographies have different levels of risk. So understanding from a priority perspective, looking at both volumetric and water risk in the area, where which is just a tool that we use to look at different projects in different locations. And then also integrating water use in our capital planning, having that be part of different projects going forward across the enterprise, so that as we grow and change as a company, we're monitoring that as part of projects.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Samantha, I see you nodding along. Yeah, what's your experience at Kohler?
Yeah, I echo what Noelle said. There, we do have some of our facilities obviously have core processes that we can take one project, that's happening in India and move it to the United States and vice versa. But like you said, Matt, it's extremely local, not only from the resource itself, but also from the people within our operations and their relationship to it. I think that's a really interesting aspect of water is the people side. So I think how making it a local approach is leaning into those teams and their expertise and their lived experience in those different geographies. One person on the call today, his name is Noman. He is located in Morocco, Africa. And so understanding their context, how they understand water, and then allowing them, they are the expert. They are the expert of that resource. So having them identify what's the biggest need they need in their facility, and then kind of overlaying that with, okay, here's what best practice is in terms of Kohler, and then sharing that out to other geographies. So a lot of communication and a lot of leaning into the local teams and their expertise and just their lived experiences.
Yeah, that is a great insight because nothing, in my experience, motivates individuals within companies more than water-related water stewardship projects, both inside the facility and outside. And like you said, lived experience, right? Those workers are in that community. They're recreating on that river or on that lake, or they're hiking or they're fishing or they're swimming or whatever. And so there's like that direct connection back to their outside work life with doing that water project at work. So it is a great motivator. We're going to get to audience questions here in like a minute. I've got one more question for our panelists before we do that. I want to just sort of see if I can draw out from, and this is open to all three of you, any sort of outcomes to date that you've seen from your investments in doing water stewardship. John kind of hinted at it a little bit around competitive advantage. We can quantify that in different ways, whether it's competitive advantage, it's bottom line impacts, it's motivated workers, within your facilities. Open question to all three of you. Any outcomes that you want to highlight at this point in terms of your work already on water stewardship? Samantha, you're nodding again.
Yeah, I can go first. I'm talking
okay.
too much. I think you nailed it when saying just water is so personal to people. So I think in my 3.5 years, when water has really become a strategic priority for Kohler, just how many people are excited for this work from like an associate engagement and retention standpoint. And then also there's some of those hard metrics where, Kohler has reduced its absolute freshwater usage by, I think, 20% in the last like 5 years, which is remarkable. And that's really from just just learning, right? Just getting data, cleaning up data, understanding where we have inefficiencies, and just focusing on it. Sometimes climate sucks all the air out of the room, and we kind of forget about water, but it's this unsung hero of everything that we do on our daily lives. So I think just the biggest outcome for me is the passion from this company and our associates, and them taking it as a personal goal, right? It's more than just about our operations and how we function. It's even more so about their families and their communities and how we impact them, as an industry and as a company. So it's been really exciting.
Excellent. Thanks. Noelle or John?
I think, I'll add to Samantha. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of innovation like within the company as the different teams get engaged and focused on it. Some improvements where we've seen that come out in our metrics. So really, really exciting to see that. I mean, certainly we have customers that request data from us that are also focused on water. So being able to partner with them definitely enhances our brand and our partnerships with our customers. And so I would say we have similar benefits, and definitely the employee engagement is a positive.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, so we've benefited in several ways, but one thing that I would like to highlight is one of the benefits that we got out of this water stewardship journey is meeting you. We've become a better part of the community with the Water Council and with the Harbor District and with several other organizations around here, which we wouldn't have if we did not go down this journey.
Okay, you get a free lunch too.
Excellent.
I love it. You know what? That actually dovetails really nicely into one of the questions we had, which was how can companies in vulnerable locations form meaningful partnerships to address shared water risks? You talked a little bit about how you did that, John, but are there any other like case studies or examples that any of you can share from your experience? Samantha, I know you've done this a lot in like India and other places. So any cool
Yeah.
story you can share or
Yeah, I think vulnerable areas is our manufacturing is in 55 different countries around the world. So we are in many of those vulnerable areas, but I think it's turning challenges into innovation, because truly when you are faced with a challenge, you have to think outside of the box, and it makes you, to John's point, talk to people that you might have not before. So I think my suggestion for the company looking at doing this is reach out to the neighbor in the industrial park or reach out to your local water utility, because they have water security strategies and water security programs. We've done this in India when we faced water security issues and, we're cut off from our water supply for 2 days. But we've also done this in Arizona in the United States, where we work with the local utility on one of their water security programs. So I think it sounds really simple, but it's as easy as just sending an email or cold calling someone, because there are so many people doing this work and passionate about it. But sometimes we all just, we get comfortable, sit in our silos. And so it's easy to feel like you're alone in it, but just reach out, and there's so many people who are doing this work.
And you might also make those connections through becoming involved with things like the Water Council and Harbor District, and maybe with some organizations that you wouldn't normally think of, like the Wisconsin DNR. Right. So through the DNR, I was introduced to the Wisconsin Sustainability Business Council. And through there, you meet their members and you meet other companies in the area that have the same concerns that you do.
Yeah, I think both really great points. I always tell companies that are beginning to do stakeholder engagement and beginning to think about collaboration to talk to their utility. You would be surprised how elated your local utility would be to hear from you. And to have a conversation not about billing rates or whatever, but to have a conversation about risk. Because the utility, through their own permitting from EPA, the state, or others, they have to do an assessment on the source water that you're ultimately receiving in your facility. So they have really great intel on climate, weather, risks impacting the local area. So yeah, so the utility is a really great place to start. Jesse, were there other questions in
We
the
have
chat?
some great questions. Michelle Miller actually asked, I'm going to ask these both together just in the interest of time, but one is, how do you measure the impact of water-related projects beyond withdrawal and consumption? Are there other measures that you are using in your businesses? And then how do you balance water efficiency with product quality or production requirements? Any examples or tips there?
I can chime in on the manufacturing side. I think it needs to be part of the project. I mean, certainly, if you're continuing to deliver quality products to your customer and meet all of those needs, that's part of the considerations when you're looking at different solutions. So definitely engage the technical experts, so they will be able to understand it when you make those changes. So I think it's just making sure you have that cross interdisciplinary team when you're working on different projects. And I don't know if either Samantha or John, you've had any other experiences with your water optimization projects?
One thing I will add to that, because you did mention water withdrawal and discharge, and it's easy to set your goals as in I want to use less water or I want to discharge less water, but the problem with that is your company is always changing, right? You're striving to grow, and the more you grow, the more water you're going to use. So one of the ways that we look at this is, rather than looking at our overall intake and discharge, we look at intensity, right? How many gallons of water per sale, or how many gallons of water per tonnage? So that's something you might want to also take into consideration.
Yeah, and then just to add to both of those great responses would be metrics we look at is, of course, financial. We want to make sure that these projects have a return on investment for the company, or, a good performance in terms of their financials. And so we're always looking at that, which sometimes can be a challenge with water because it's so affordable in most of our geographies. But then also looking at it from a resilience perspective, like maybe the cost isn't today, but in 5 years, 10 years, if we don't fix that pipe, if we don't install that meter, what's the impact to our business? So that's a really big part. And Matt talked about Nexus. Water touches everything. So name a co-benefit, community, whether it's community, government, brand, whatever it is, water touches and influences. And then the only other comment I wanted to make was the second question, Jesse, of impacting product performance or quality. I think sometimes there's this misconception, specifically in the US, that more water is better. And sometimes that's not true. Sometimes, we're just using more water because that's the status quo. When in reality, you would get the same product with, a fourth of the water usage. It gets a little more difficult when it comes to water quality. That's something that we've been challenged with. You have to make sure that you have good water quality. And the more you use a drop of water, the worse the water quality gets. So that is a challenge, but I would challenge the thinking that more water means better, because sometimes that's not the case.
Jesse, did you want to wrap things up?
Yeah, thanks so much to everyone today for your great insights, Matt. I always love sharing screen time with you. I just feel like I always learn so much, and you're so eloquent in talking about this. Is really just an expert in this area. So just hats off to you and all the great work the Water Council is doing. And if anybody needs support in this area, the Water Council is just a great resource. So, and then thanks really to our panelists, Samantha, John, Noelle. Really appreciate you sharing your stories with us. As I mentioned, I've been kind of taking some notes and writing down some resources. So I will accumulate this and share it out to everyone that was registered along with the recording. So thanks for sharing your time with us today. And just hope everyone enjoys the rest of summer and continues to think about how they can improve their water strategy. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Take
Have
care.
a great day.
You too.
Bye. Thank you.